break colts and cuss, which I'm going to try not to do today, but I don't make any promises. So, it's pretty, a lot of you guys grew up the same way, outside hunting and fishing and doing a little cowboying and chasing girls, and it was great. I really love Millard County. And I was a bad student, which some of these people can attest to. I couldn't even believe they let me go up there today, but I was terrible. I just kept my grades good enough to play baseball and wrestle, and that was about it. Otherwise, I was mostly sloughing and messing around and whatnot. And then on 9/11, which some of you guys, gosh, I guess none of you guys were even born. I was a junior in high school, and I had always kind of wanted to be in the military, but I don't know, the peacetime army didn't make a lot of sense to me, so I'd had no real desire to enlist until 9/11 happened, and I was doing my typical thing, sloughing school over at my cousin's house, and it ended up kind of working out because I didn't get an absence because school was canceled, and we turned on the TV, and just about in time to see the second plane hit that second tower, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen the videos, and in that moment I think we all knew that our country and our lives were going to change forever. So I talked to a recruiter. I decided I wanted to go over and kill some terrorists, I guess. And so I talked to a recruiter, and I enlisted on a delayed enlistment program, early entry. Maybe some of you guys are on it right now. And then as soon as I graduated, I shipped off to Fort Benning. It's in southern Georgia. And as soon as I got to my first unit, I was asking around, like, when were we going to deploy, if we were going to deploy anytime soon, that kind of thing, and we weren't. So I volunteered. I found another unit that was going over. We didn't know where at the time, but I joined that unit so I could go with them. And they were looking for guys to fill this role called PSD. It's Personal Security Detail. So if I accidentally say PSD during this thing, that's what I'm talking about. And personal security detail, it's like the Army's idea of a secret service, except for way less funding and less training. We don't get to wear cool suits and stuff. But that's what they needed, so that's what I did. I was a PSD guy, and we did an extra train up in Mississippi before we shipped off, and we still didn't know where we were going. There was rumors we were going to Afghanistan. There was other rumors we were going to Iraq, but we didn't know where. And anyway, right about a week before we finally deployed, we found out we were going to Ramadi. And at the time, Ramadi was the most dangerous city in the world, and we all knew that. And, kind of right where I wanted to be as a young punk kid. So we ship off, and the first place you go is Kuwait. And you stage there, and it's a desert, just like about what you'd picture in a movie. If any of y'all saw the new Dune movie, it looks about like that. And we get off the plane, it's like 130 degrees, the wind's blowing, the wind actually feels hot. It's odd, and sand in there, like you got some annoying little brother with a hairdryer in your face or something. And we were living in these circus tents, and I mean real circus tents, like Barnum and Bailey. They got the stripes and all that stuff. And so you can imagine about 40 young men in a circus tent in the middle of a desert with only 3 pairs of underwear and 3 pairs of socks and 2 uniforms. It was gross. So we couldn't wait to get up to Iraq and kind of get fighting, just to get out of Kuwait, if nothing else. I mean, you can only play hearts for so long before it gets boring. So we left Kuwait, and a lot of our guys flew up on helicopters and airplanes up to Ramadi, but because I was a security guy, the convoy from Kuwait to Ramadi needed a security team. The convoy's packing all of our ammunition and artillery pieces and tanks and all that stuff. So I was on the drive up, pulling security on the drive up for the convoy. And as soon as you cross the border from Kuwait to Iraq, it's kind of a post-apocalyptic looking scene. There's these oil wells on fire and just black smoke everywhere. And I don't know if Saddam lit them on fire for this war or if it had been the '88 Iraq-Iran war. I'm not sure. But either way, they had torched their oil wells, so it's just black smoke everywhere and blown up cars and vehicles, and it looked about like what you'd expect a war zone to look like. But we didn't get in any gunfights or nothing on the way up. The first night we stayed in this place called Scania, and I slept in the building with these Polish Special Forces guys, and every one of them were on juice. They were all on gear, and so we were trying to score, maybe I shouldn't say that. Anyway, and then the next day we drove from Scania to Ramadi, and about 2 o'clock in the morning we hit our first IED. This was my second day in Iraq, and there was a Marine was helping us on the security team, and he came around and knocked on our door, and he said, "Hey, we've got orders to trace this det cord back and just blow up whatever building it was in." And I was 19 and had machine guns and grenades, so I thought this was going to be awesome. So I get out, get my night vision on, throw an AT-4 on my back. AT-4 is an anti-tank rocket, grab some extra grenades, and we're going to go blow this building up. It was cool. I was so dang excited. So we sneak off through this field. It's in the dark, as you can imagine. And we get to this compound, following the det cord, and there was a big brick wall around this whole compound, so we were trying to find a way in that wouldn't flag us so they could see us, and we ended up finding a hole in the side of it where it had been hit with a rocket or something. So we snuck through that hole, and as soon as we got into the compound, there was this freaking dog in there barking inside the building. And I kept thinking, man, I can't wait to blow that dog up, because I know it's rude, but he was giving away our position, and we were pretty nervous. My first time experiencing anything combat related, so tensions were high, as you can imagine. And we come around the front of that building to check to see exactly where the det cord went in, and it went through a window in the front. So I said, well, let's go around the back and see if it comes out the back end. And we got to the middle of the front of the building, and there was these shoes laid out on the porch. And it was from oldest to youngest. And there was a dad, and then a mom, and then the oldest kid, and then a younger kid, and then this little pair of pink flip-flops had to be for like a little 2-year-old girl. And that was when the reality of combat hit me for the first time. You know, it's rough. Sometimes innocent people get hurt. And luckily, in this case, we went all the way around the building, like I said, and the det cord had gone all the way through. And what the terrorist people had done is they took this family hostage, and they'd shoved them in a cellar in the basement, and then they put a big piece of plywood over the cellar door and set a generator on it so we couldn't hear them screaming. But luckily we didn't blow that building up. We went and anyway, got back in the convoy and headed off. So we get to Ramadi the next morning, and Ramadi was non-stop gunfights. All day and night is all you could hear. Is just all around the city, just gunfights. So we were, I'd went from being amped and all kinds of excited about this cool job I had to being pretty nervous. And I got my first gunfight my first week there. I think it was about day 5. And it's pretty surreal. Took sniper fire for the first time on, I think it was day 7 or 9. And sniper fire is a different thing. Gunfights, we're all just kind of shooting at each other. But when somebody shoots at you with a sniper rifle, it's extremely personal feeling, because they had to pick you out of the group. So we had a few firefights and experiences like that. Some of it's real ugly, I won't share. And some of it was, hanging out with your best friends, having a good time. But we hadn't had anything too awful bad happen other than just regular combat stuff until, one day we were going on this mission to find a weapons cache on the Tigris and Euphrates River. They're big, and there's islands on them, and these terrorist guys would stash weapons on those islands, like bombs and Russian rockets and stuff like that. So we were taking a helicopter and landing them on these islands and looking for things. And anyway, this one particular day, we get about 2 minutes off of the objective, and that's when you lock and load your rifles and all that. So we lock and load, and then I see the crew chief going like this, and we're like, what the heck? And my buddy points out the window, and the helicopter we're on's on fire. You could see smoke bellowing out of it. And we made it all the way back to the base, but artillery was shooting, counter battery it's called. They were shooting back at people that had shot at us, so we couldn't land. And then the rear engine went out from the electrical fire, and we, they called it a hard landing, but it felt like a dang crash to me. Bounced off the concrete there, and I remember we were doing a head count after we got off the bird, making sure everybody was there and accounted for. And I said to my buddy Johnny, I said, well, at least we're not going on that Treasure Island mission anymore. And I'm not kidding, it was like a scene out of a movie. Right as I said that, another helicopter was landing behind to send us back over. So a bunch of things like that, basically, just kind of everyday war stuff had happened. But no one had been too seriously hurt. We had, a few wounds here and there, little shrapnel fragments, and I once cut the end of my finger off because I was trying to warm it up in the heater of the Humvee, which is a bad idea. Don't do that. But nothing bad. And then on January 5th of 2006, we were on what was supposed to be the 3-day mission, but this here was the 4th day. They'd extended us. The night before, there was too many people to process, so it got extended anyway. And the mission was, we were supposed to be recruiting Iraqis to become police officers because of, I don't know how much you guys know about geopolitics, but Iraq is carved up into Shia and Sunni Arabs, and the Army and Marine Corps had been using Shia Arabs to police Sunni neighborhoods, and it just does not work. They won't give you any information and then just shoot at you. So we were trying to get Sunnis recruited, and then we would ship them over to Jordan, and then they'd get training there and then come back and police their own town. So that's what we were doing. And the night before, there'd been too many people to process, so the colonel said, we're going to do one more day. And everybody on my team told him it was a terrible idea. We'd got shot at with rockets on day 2. We had watched somebody monitor us all day on day 3. We just knew something bad was going to happen. So we told him not to do it, but he didn't, they don't listen. So we head out there. And in the morning, we meet up with S2, which is the intel guys, and they give us whatever new intel they have. And the intel guys told us that we need to be expecting a V-bed attack, which is a vehicle-borne IED. It's just a car with a bomb in it. So we roll up to this glass factory, and it's a big factory, maybe 250 foot long by 4 stories tall, and it's got 3-4 buildings in there, and then a big brick wall around it. And we were using the brick wall to keep the Iraqis out and us in. We were basically using that to sift them through. So I get to this man gate in that brick wall that morning, and there's already 1,000 Iraqis lined up from us all the way down to this JRTC checkpoint. So I radio up and say, hey, this is not good. There are already people here. So they, Roger, continue mission type stuff. So Johnny and he was Alpha team leader, and I'd got promoted, so I was Bravo team leader now. We met up, and I said, hey man, I'm not sending any of my guys out there in that crowd right now. This is a nightmare. And he agreed. So Johnny and I and our little interpreter, Carlos, he was from southern Iraq, but we called him Carlos because he looked like he's from Juarez. So we went out in the crowd and started asking questions. We were asking them, who told you to be here? Why are you even here? These kind of things. And the answers were mostly, either our cleric told us to be here, which is a huge red flag, or, I just wanted the best opportunity to get the job, which, may or may not be true. So we knew there was kind of some BS going. Hey, there's my one boy. We knew there was, you actually put it on that first slide. It'll give you guys a better idea. There you go. So that's me on the left, and that's little old Carlos behind me. And that's the gate I was talking about. And then the next slide, you can see how many guys were out there. Anyway, they'll get to it. So we're asking, as I'm talking to him, I'm out here in this crowd, as I'm talking to him, this Iraqi runs up to me, and he's hollering at me, frantically in my ear. And I don't know what he's saying. I only speak maybe 15, 20 words of Arabic at the time. And I asked Carlos, hey, what the heck is this guy saying? And he said he saw a grenade. And I said, okay, where'd he see a grenade? And he said it's a grenade with wires. And I said, where? And he said he doesn't know. And I couldn't quite process what was going on. I thought there was a tripwire, like a booby trap out there somewhere. So we had external and internal communication systems. And the internal, I could just talk to my team. So I radioed up to my team and said, hey, don't come out here. There's a booby trap somewhere. We need to figure out where that's at before anything else, goes on. And right about exactly that time, to the kind of the very back of that picture, a semi-truck crashed through our eastern perimeter, and all of my guys just started shooting. We were told, if you'll recall, to expect V-bed. So we were thinking that is one big dang V-bed. So we started shooting it up, and then Iraqis were just running everywhere. I mean, you can imagine in their minds, they're kind of like stuck between a rock wall and a gunfight. It's really not even their fault. They were scared to death. So now we think there's a booby trap out here, and there's Iraqis running all over the place frantically, and I can't communicate with any of them. So it was a bad situation. So that's when these other guys come out and started trying to help us get them under control. And one of the guys that met me at the gate was a friend of ours, Sergeant Can, and he was a dog handler. And they had Malinois dogs, Belgian Malinois, and they are really handy for crowd control. They're terrifying animals, and they're mean. So he said, do you want us to go get our dog? And his dog was just sleeping on the hood of my Humvee, so I was like, yeah, go get that bugger, bring him out here. So he comes out with the dog, and now we're trying to get these guys sorted into lines. And see, Paul Bremer had, just quick backstory so you understand why we were putting them in lines. The George Bush government had decided that it would be a good idea to expel all Baathists, which was it would be like expelling all of the Republicans in America from a government job. So it was a political party, and they had decided because Saddam was the leader of the Ba'athist party that they couldn't risk having any Baathists in office. So we had to separate these people into 3 lines so we could go through their IDs and then kick out whoever was a Ba'athist because they couldn't become a cop, right? So we're getting them in these lines, and my medic calls me on the radio and he says, hey, I'm going to come out there. And just as I was telling him, no, stay in, I had my head tilted down like this, I heard Sergeant Can's dog start growling. So I kind of looked up over the corner of my helmet, and I saw his dog have this guy's arm in his mouth and was shaking, and knew right then that something was wrong. And then the next thing was just 2 bright white flashes and a loud explosion. So I woke up, go to the next slide. I woke up on the ground on my belly, and all I could see was a bunch of guts, blood and guts and shoes everywhere. And I was laying there contemplating, trying to figure out, if I just got blown in half. So I was rubbing this with my left hand, was rubbing this one entrail of whatever kind, trying to see if I could feel it. And I failed anatomy, so I don't even know what one it was, but I couldn't feel it. So I couldn't decide if I was paralyzed, and that's why I couldn't feel it, or if I just couldn't, if it wasn't mine. And right about that time, I hear Johnny yelling my name. They all called me Mac. It's just like sports teams. Any Irish guy just gets called Mac. So he's yelling, Mac, Mac, and I'm trying to yell back at him, but it really is kind of like being in a movie. I felt like I was drowning. I couldn't get my mind right and couldn't really hear. And then next thing I know, I feel a little bit of weight come off my back, and at this time I'm propped up on my one elbow, and I felt a little weight go, and then a little bit more, and then I saw those guts get pulled out, and then I could see my hip bones for the first time. I could see my pants where my hips are at for the first time, so I knew I hadn't been blown in half, but I still couldn't tell how bad it had actually been. And then they rolled me over, and my femurs were broken so bad that I remember it sounded like inside my head like a sack of wrenches, rolling. And what had happened is I'd gotten hit by a suicide bomber that Sergeant Can's dog had discovered. And the suicide bomber hit me with over 50 ball bearings. I'm still packing 12 or 20 of them, something like that now today, and busted my left tibia, my left femur in 3 places, my left hip in 2 places, broke my back, broke my right femur in 2 places, my right hip in 1, broke all the bones in my right hand, and this one's like permanently fused like this. I had a brain injury, I had some broken ribs, and my left humerus had a spiral fracture. My right radius and ulnar were fractured. Pretty much just everything that wasn't covered in iron was, covered in armor rather, was broken. And little pieces of shrapnel in my face and neck, which still come out all the time. So that's the situation I was in. And they had just rolled me over, and they were trying to do, triage to treat the wounds. And I'm laying there in Johnny's lap, talking to him, and the medic is going through cutting clothes off and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't know, I still wasn't sure if my legs were fully attached, if I was going to be able to keep them or not. So I was pretty nervous. And then he cut my pants up, and then I could see that my legs were all the way still attached for the first time, but I had all these holes in them from shrapnel, and I'd got shot with an AK in my one leg, and so it was busted up pretty bad. And I remember looking at that, and every time my heart would beat, blood would just pour out of those holes. So I knew I had arterial damage, pretty sure I was going to die is what I was. I'd seen people get hit, and I'd never seen anybody get hit that bad and live. So I was worried, pretty worried. And I start telling, man, 20 years, I still get choked up sometimes. Start telling, my buddies I love them, and tell my mom I love her, all this kind of stuff. And anyway, they get me on to a medevac truck and sent back to the base. And I get to the base, and they put a PICC line in my neck to start administering blood, my arms to start administering blood. And then they put me right on a helicopter, and the idea was to try to get me to Air Force Hospital in Balad, as the Air Force hospitals are just better. So that's where they were trying to get me to. And we made it about 15 minutes in the air, and then we had to land in this base called Tequatum because I needed more blood, and they got more blood there. And then they tried to fly from TQ to Balad, and we had to stop in a place called Fallujah, and I had to get emergency treatment there. And they put a PICC line in my neck to get more blood coming in. I had something like 7 quarts going in at once, and then they had to do, like, say, an emergency surgery. And when your legs get broke that bad, your femurs, your quads are strong, and your butt is strong, so it compresses everything. So my legs were like this long and that wide, and I was developing what's called compartment syndrome, which is where your body's just almost creating an internal tourniquet because there's so much pressure inside. So in order to try to save my legs, and the doctor, by the way, that worked on me there was from Delta. I remember him saying that, but I couldn't have any pain meds yet because my blood pressure was really low and it was bad. So he said, hey, just bite down on this rag. We're going to have to open your legs up. So they took a scalpel and split me from knee to hip on both sides to try to relieve the pressure. And then they pulled my legs out and put them in a traction splint thing. And if you go to the next slide, I think you'll be able to see some pictures. Oh yeah, that's how I arrived in America. These things on the side of the leg, those are called external fixators. That I got those put on later. But go to the next one. I think there's another. Yeah, there you go. You can see where they opened me up and put those wound vacs in there. And the idea is to pull swelling and infection and all that kind of stuff out. So he does that there, and then they get me stable enough to fly to Balad. And then I go from Balad to Germany. And that's where I got these external fixators put on and got me out of the traction splint so I could sit up and stuff like that. And I had to have those external fixators in order to be able to fly back to America for care. So I was stuck in Landstuhl until they were able to get those in. And then they flew me to Walter Reed, which is in D.C. And D.C. is just a terrible, awful place. So I had to live there, which I hated. And when I got there, the prognosis was, they were definitely still not even sure if I was going to live. I spent another 6 weeks in intensive care, and then got moved up to the neuro ward, but the prognosis was that I was probably never going to be able to walk again. And one surgeon said, if you want to walk, I think you can do it, but you're going to have to do it right now, not let your muscles get any more atrophied and that kind of stuff. And so by now I'd been in the hospital for about 5 or 6 weeks, and I was waiting to get rods put in, internal rods, so they could close all this stuff up. But I couldn't get the internal rods put in until the infections in my body were cleared up. There's a bug that they have in the sand over there we have a hard time getting rid of it. There's not real good antibiotics for it. So we had to wait to clear all that up, and the sepsis and all that kind of thing. So I was, it was rough. And then every morning for like 20 straight days I had surgery, and it was terrible. So I was really looking forward to getting these rods put in, which you'll see in a minute, because that would mean I could actually get out of bed and get into a wheelchair then. So finally the day comes, and I get my surgery to get my rods put in, and things are starting to look up. It's looking like I'm maybe going to live, and I got an opportunity to maybe get on my feet and get better. And that night I had a blood clot from the surgery hit my lung, collapsed my left lung, and I ended up back in ICU. And it's just this big up and down roller coaster recovery. Here I am excited that I finally got myself out, into a position where I could get into a wheelchair, because that was a big goal of ours. And then as soon as that happened, I ended up back in intensive care getting my lungs worked on. A couple weeks later, they send me back up to the neuro ward, lung issues healed up, and I go to physical therapy. And my physical therapist was this great big dude. He played defensive end for the New York Giants. He's like 6'6", 300-something pounds, great big guy. And he said, if you want to walk, let's try it. And I said, okay. So if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see those bars. Oh, see, these here are the rods I was talking about they've put in. That one on the left is crooked now because I got bucked off a half draft a few months ago and bent it. But so, they say whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but it doesn't make you smarter. I can attest. So go to the next one. I'm sorry. There you go. So I get to physical therapy, and I'd lost 40 pounds by now, something like that. And Solomon was the name of the physical therapist. He gets me up onto these here parallel bars for the first time, and I walked up and down them. My arm, my hand is still broken. My left arm's actually, you could see a little fake cast thing on that. My arm's broken, but that was the only limb I had that could kind of work, so they didn't cast it. So I just had to use it. So I walked up and down that, all my bones still broken. It was absolute misery. But at the end, it was one of the coolest feelings I've ever had in my life. It was like real accomplishment. And then next thing you know, I'm having to hold onto Solomon's neck, like to get back into my wheelchair, like a prom date or something. But I went from being pretty excited to, embarrassed again. And that's sort of like how life goes, right? Like lots of ups and downs. So after this, I started doing my best to walk every day for as much as I could, and it was not much, but every day, just over and over, plugging away at it, and 19, or I think I was 20 now. I'd been 195, 200 pounds just a couple months before, and now it's like 150, and, scraggly, and once an athlete, and now I never know if I'm going to walk again. I was in a real low place mentally, really low. And, some of those thoughts start creeping in, am I ever even going to be able to make it through this, that kind of thing. And then a friend of mine he's a Vietnam War veteran guy, he came to the hospital to visit me. And he wanted to go see some of his friends in Arlington National, that are buried in the Arlington National Cemetery. And I wanted to go see Sergeant Can. So we snuck out of the hospital illegally, and we went to Arlington. And when you get to Arlington, have any of you guys ever been there by show of hands? Yeah, it's a pretty powerful place. There's something about it. It's just very profound. So we get out, and I get in my wheelchair, and I got those canes to help me get to the bathroom, the ones like old people have that have 4 feet on them at the ends. So I get in my wheelchair, and he pushes me into Arlington, and there's these signs all over the place that just say silence and respect, and I was very depressed, like I say. So I started drinking on my drive home from GWAB on the dirt roads, but started drinking on my drive home, and I got home to Scipio, and my ex-wife was there, and I just did not want to live anymore. So I went into my room, and I grabbed one of my pistols, and I drove up to this place in Scipio in the East Hills there, where me and my friends used to hang out and cut firewood and do other things and whatnot. And I sat there and drank more for a while, just trying to maybe get up the nerve to actually do it, I guess. And then I passed out. And when I woke up, my head was swimming. I was sick, so I threw up, and I was trying to get out of the door of the truck so I wouldn't puke in my Dodge, and I fell onto the ground, and I was laying there. I'd thrown up on myself, bleeding, and staring up at the sun, thinking about what my life had become. And I remember I was holding my right hand up to block the sun, and I had done that same thing in Iraq, and I remember the blood running off of my right hand onto my face. But in that moment, I had felt proud of myself for what I had done. In Iraq, I mean. And in this moment, I was at the lowest point I'd ever been in my life. And I again said, I cannot believe I would let it get this far, but I had. So I got up from that and went back home, cleaned myself off, and swore I was going to do it all right again and not drink and get rid of these stupid pills and all of that. And I'd love to sit here and tell you that that's exactly how it went, like a movie. Like that was it, rock bottom, and then I was just better forever. But it's not. I failed again many times over. But eventually, after years and years of hard work, I was able to get, myself better, and I got off all those pills a long time ago and got my life together and started doing a little better. And a lot of that help was Coach Turner and Coach Sheriff letting me come help coach wrestling over here and give me something positive, make me feel like I had value to add to the world again. That was really powerful for me, and that helped. And then one day, about 8 years later, I still had not run. I could walk. I was really not using the cane too much anymore. And I was helping coach this little league baseball deal, and I was throwing batting practice, and this kid hit a ball off to my glove hand side, and I just took two kind of quick sort of steps at it, and something clicked in my mind, and I knew that I could run. So I tried it. I couldn't run very fast, but I tried it, and I did some jogging around the bases, and then from that moment I called my buddy Johnny, who lives actually in northern Utah, and he was running. He was my alpha team leader, and he was running marathons and all this kind of stuff at the time. And I said, hey, John, I can run. And he started crying, and because no one thought that was going to happen, including myself, for a long time. But I finally got to where I could do it, and I said, I want to run my first mile with you. So I drove up, and we ran a mile together. And then, I just kind of built on that, started running 2 miles here and there, and then 3 miles, and then, 6 miles some days. And then I was talking with Coach Sheriff one day, and he was going to do some duathlon deal, and I didn't even know what the heck a duathlon was. But I said I wanted to do it with him, so we started training. We spent the winter training for that. It was down in St. George. And about 10 years later, I competed in my first duathlon, and I'd like to tell you I won it, and I would have, I think, but I didn't. Me and this other guy were way ahead. And the kid, there's like these people that they like flag you directions, tell you where to go. The kid was in his truck when we got there, and he just pointed. And so I just went that way. And the next thing you know, I was at a Taco Bell asking to borrow a phone to try to find my way back to the starting point. But the real point is I was able to run again, and it was fun, and I was able to do it with one of my good friends, and it was an inspiring and beautiful moment in my life, even though it didn't turn out the way I had wanted it to. It's funny too, the race director came over to my little sister and was like, hey, we'll just give him second place, because they kind of mark your times as you're going, and she goes, he doesn't want second place. And so, and I didn't, she's right. But, so anyway, my life was going really good then. You know, I was running every day, and like I told you before, I grew up fishing and hunting, and I wanted to get back outside. So I was finally able to start getting back out, and I took my bow and climbed this ridge on an elk hunt for the first time. And I remember sitting there on top of that ridge. The wind was blowing really hard, like really hard. And I was thinking, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to get an elk in all this wind. And I started getting a little mad at myself for a second. And then I thought, you know what? It doesn't matter, man. This is great, you know. I was finally able to do something that no one thought I was going to be able to do. So it was wonderful. I was able to start hunting again and get up, and then I started guiding, and, you know, life is basically back to where it's supposed to be. And then one day my best friend calls me up and he tells me, hey, there's this forbidden mountain hike in Hawaii, you got to go do it. And it's really not forbidden. He just knows that that's a good way to get me to go do something. So I signed up and I got a flight and went to go to fly to Hawaii, and it's in the airport. I met my wife online while I was sitting in the airport. She was flying to Maui, and I was flying to Hawaii, and anyway, it worked out. So how'd I never went on this trip? I maybe would have never met her, I don't know. And that worked out all right most days. So I get to Hawaii, same kind of thing all over again. The plan was people had told me that this is the prettiest sunset or sunrise you'll ever see in your life, is on this Mauna Kea is the name of the mountain. And I'm pretty partial to Millard County sunrises, and so I thought I'd go see for myself whether it is or not. And the plan had been to start hiking at 1 o'clock in the morning and get to the top, you know, by sunrise. And it had been my goal for months and months and months. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm still, I don't know, quarter mile from the top, and I realized I was never going to make it in time. But I climbed all the way up there anyway. I hope you're noticing a pattern here. Up and down, man, that's life, right? And again, I was kind of beating myself up. I'm a pretty competitive guy, and I was frustrated that I had not made my goal. But sat there on top anyway, and ate some food and drank some coffee and watched the sunrise and enjoyed my day, to tell you the truth. And if there's one lesson, and I'm going to leave you with a quote here in a minute on this, but if there is one lesson I've learned in life, it is that things are just not going to go the way you want them to 90% of the time. And no matter how bad things are or whatever, if you just stick it out, it'll work out in the end, okay? So that was kind of what I was doing. It's just sitting there thinking about life, contemplating, staring at the sun, and, you know, living. And then I climbed down and went home. And then I met one on a date with my wife for the first time. And we got married. And now we have 4 kids. And we live in Idaho, which is beautiful. And we're blessed to do it and to be there. And we love it. And life is good. It really could not be better. But when I think back on those times when I was down enough to be suicidal, it's hard for me to know how even my mind in that state would have reacted to knowing where I'm at now. So if you ever do get feeling like that, you really need to do your best. What I think works the best for me is to write out something like a 10-year plan and think of where I might be able to see myself in 10 years. And the reason for this goal, or doing it this here way, is because then you start using your imagination, and the imagination can be a very powerful and positive thing, and a lot of psychiatrists won't tell you this, but it's 100% true. Just start dreaming of whatever's the most wild thing you could ever think of, and I think, for me, that's probably the best way to pull myself out of a depression, which I'm sure some of you guys are suffering with. I remember high school as well. So anyway, life is great now, and there's no way I could have saw it coming. I'm riding colts every day, roping cows and enjoying myself, and I get to eat 3 meals with my sons and my daughter, And I'm blessed more than I deserve. And it is wonderful. I don't have time to tell you this other story. Okay, I am going to just leave you with this one quote, if you will allow me, because I think it's one of the most powerful ones I've read in a long time. Powerful in its simplicity. This is from a guy called Master Sergeant Chuck Ritter. He was a Special Forces guy, and not just any Special Forces guy. He's a very well-known and renowned for his valor in combat. He's a brave, very brave, and good and strong man. He's one of the strongest men you'd ever meet in your life, okay? And he said, if I could go back in time and give a younger me one message, it would be, check your ego regularly and normalize failing. You can't really grow without failing, and your ego will keep you from being okay with it. Failure and defeat are not the same. And I'll tell you guys, if there's anything I've learned throughout my journey in life, it is that failure and defeat are not the same thing. A lot of sports coaches, they'll say never quit, never give up, this kind of stuff, but that's all hokey nonsense. Everybody quits, or at least, lets off the gas a little bit at some point in their life. And if you try to beat some crap like that into your head, then in that moment where maybe you're a little weaker than you normally would be or otherwise, then you'll beat yourself up worse for it, because you'll say, well, I'm a quitter now. And it's just not true. Just kind of keep your eyes focused forward and try to remember that failure and defeat are not the same thing. Thank you for your time.
We want to thank Sergeant Braxton McCoy for coming. That was a beautiful message. I hope you guys were listening, because there's a lot that we can all gain from that. As Veterans Day gets closer, I just want to remind you guys of why veterans are important to us and why we're grateful for them. One, kind of the obvious reason is they've given us our freedom, and they fought for our freedom throughout the years. But it gets deeper than that. Veterans haven't only fought for just our own, like the country's freedom, but we need to remember why they fight. They go out into the battlefield to fight, not just for the country as a whole, but they fight for the smaller, more meaningful purposes, like their husbands and wives at home, and their sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, parents, grandparents, their friends, and their community at home. They fight for the individual people that they love, and for the members of their community. And as they come back from war, they bring hope to our community that there is freedom and there is good things to fight for, and that they go out there because they love us. And this Veterans Day, I want you guys to remember who the veterans in your life are, and whether it be a brother or a father or a mother or an aunt or just a family friend. But I want you guys to go thank the veterans in your life for the wonderful acts of service that they've given us, and the amazing blessings that they've given us in our lives, and the freedom that they've blessed us with. And so yeah, go thank the veterans in your lives. That concludes our assembly, and again, thank you to Sergeant Braxton McCoy. Let's give him one more round of applause. You guys are now excused to go to second period.